Hey fans, welcome to another Train Simulator 2021 video, and today we'll be looking at the brand new Smokebox Union Pacific 4000 class steam locomotive, better known as the Big Boy. This is going to be part one of a three-part video series that I'll be recording um, on this locomotive. Basically just a tutorial slash demonstration series where I run through features of the locomotive and how to properly operate it. So part one of this video is going to be focused simply on the exterior model and the controls that you'll be manipulating. So this one will be pretty short. So we'll just load up in Cheyenne and we'll run through a couple of the basic things here. As with all Smokebox products, I highly recommend opening up the DLC manual and reading through it. The steam locomotives that he uh, produces are extremely well scripted, extremely complex, and you're really doing yourself a disservice if you're just jumping into this without first reading the manual on how to properly work the locomotive. So, um, read the manual. Alright, so let this load up. Okay, so here we are in the cab of the Big Boy, and as you can see, extremely detailed, very well textured. One difference with this locomotive compared to the 844 is that when you first load up into the 844, there's a bunch of things you have to set up and turn on to make the locomotive work. That being said, on the 4000s, this is no longer the case. Once you load up into the cab of the locomotive, you're actually pretty much set. You're ready to go. The dynamo's on, the blow-off shutdown is open, so your boiler blowdown works. There's nothing you really need to do in terms of setup to get this locomotive to operate properly. You can just sort of release your brakes and put your reverse gear in position and full throttle, and the locomotive will do what you want it to do. The automatic Fireman that's scripted for this locomotive by default is on when you load up the locomotive, so there's nothing you really need to do in that department. So I'm just gonna do a couple things here just to set it up to my preferences before I do this run around here. So I'm going to shut the cab light and the gauge lights off. There we go. Let's see, we'll come back here. As you can see, there are a multitude of different camera angles that you can access while you're in the cab, which is neat. Really gives you a feeling of being able to move around inside the cab itself. So, alright, so here we are in the engineer's position. Controls are pretty straightforward. There's your throttle, your reverse gear here, and your brakes. So you got your train brake, your automatic brake here, your engine brake here. Cylinder cocks. The cylinder cock master valve is open. This is the cylinder cock valve itself to open and close the cylinder cocks. These are closed, so if you want to open them, before you start moving, you just have to click it or hit the keyboard command for it, which is C. Down here on the brake stand, this is your first surface cutout. It's automatically cut in, so if you don't like using first service, you can cut that out. It's your bell, your emergency brake control for the locomotive. All this stuff I will go into more detail when I record the next part. of this series on how to run the locomotive. So there's your sander, your stack hood for going in tunnels, and then your blowdown control here. Up here you have your back pressure gauge, your duplex air gauges for the brake system, your boiler pressure. Down here we have our live injector control, your water valve which needs to be open for the live injector to be functional, your water gauge cocks, which can be used to verify the level of water in the water column. And here is your whistle. Okay, so over here we have a couple of extra things. There's a rail washer here. This is just an animated effect of steam being applied to the rails behind the rear set of drivers when the sanders are on to wash away the sand. Your reverse gear steam control, which doesn't actually shut off the reverse gear because you don't want to do that. This toggles the brake alerts on and off. Default, it's on, so you really don't have to do anything with that if you don't mind the brake alerts coming up in the top right corner of the screen. Alright, let's move over to the center of the control cab. You got your roof vent here, open and shut. And then up on the top here you have that's your cab light, injector light, rear backup light on the tender, and your running board lights. So I'll turn the injector light on. Once again, there's your live water valve down in the middle. Ash pan controls here. These don't really do anything. These are non-functional except for this middle one here. This will toggle on and off the smoke wings on the firebox, the smoke box. And then moving over into the fireman's position, here you have your blower, your smoke lifter, which I like to run with on to lift the smoke away from the window here. There we go. Here you have your Stoker jet manifold control. This controls the pressure into the Stoker jet manifold, and then down here you have your individual Stoker jet controls to control the steam pressure to each individual jet. It's labeled as such. You got your Stoker operating valve controls the steam pressure to the Stoker engine in the tender. Stoker booster in case there's a blockage. You're not really going to use it that often. Coal sprinkler is non-functional, and then over here you have your exhaust steam injector starting valve and your exhaust steam injector water regulator index. So up here you have a couple other things. There's this steam heat control. This is purely cosmetic because you're not actually, there's no simulation to supply steam heat to the coaches and stuff. It does, if you do turn it on, it does turn that gauge up there. Another thing that is different from this locomotive versus 844 is that all the controls are set so that it's either fully open, fully closed. There's no halfway with this locomotive here. Whereas 844 you had a bigger degree of control with the settings. I personally like this a little better. It's a little less complicated. You're not really fussing around too much with setting the controls exactly the way they should be. They're either fully on or fully off for the controls that don't need to be fine-tuned. You got your two water columns here accompanied by your dual water glass setup. You have your blowdown, your sight glass blowdowns, and your column blowdowns to keep them unblocked. Here you got your signal foam meter. This will, that's a test light here. So this will automatically function if there's foam in the boiler approaching a certain level. Up here in the corner, that's your performance report, so you can click that and that'll bring up the information that you can see in this report. You got your time of day, speed, current blockages, whether they're water blockages or Stoker blockages, then your foam level meter, obviously here's the percentages for that, 10% safe. The foam meter will activate approaching 10% anyway, so you'll never really approach the unsafe level here. Your coal bed, distribution here, and your Stoker jet settings, stoking rate, and then your consist information, which is includes weight and length. And then down here on the bottom you have your brake information. So we'll go into more detail about that later on in the following videos. Alright, so enough about the inside of the cab. Let's take a look at the outside of the locomotive here. Okay, so once again, very well done. Extremely detailed here. Let me see if I can move around. You got your road number, your class designation. There's your power reverse gear. Yep. Here's those lights I was talking about earlier that you can control in the cab. That's your injector light. And then we move down the running boards here. Here's your running board lights here. So if I went into the cab to shut those controls off, these lights would actually turn off. So your power reverse, your running gear here, extremely detailed. There's your throttle linkage, safety valves, cylinder cocks, forward set of drivers, including the original rod actuated forward mechanical lubricator. You might know that this design ended up being a little fragile. It was prone to breakages, so it was replaced with that chain-driven system that we see on the 4014 today. So let's take a look at the smoke box area of the locomotive. We have our stack hood, very well animated. Control that with the control in the cab or using the keyboard macro Control Shift D. Here's your builder's plate. The locomotive is equipped with dynamic numbering, so while you're in the simulation you can actually change the number of the locomotive. That'll change the builder's plate as well, and also the number on the tender. You've got your forward pilot coupler here that can swing in so that it's hidden. Control for that would be Control Shift P. So let's do that. You see the coupler cut bar detaching and going into the stowed position as well when you're doing that. It's pretty cool. Let's see here. Let's play around with that numbering actually. So that's going to be Control 5. I think it's Control 5. Let's see. Yep. So Control 5 will decrease the number. Shift 5 will increase the number. And as you can see, the builder's plate changes as well when you do that. You can also toggle on the Smokebox chalk, Control Shift B, right big boy on the locomotive. Now it's important to note that the series of locomotives being modeled here is the original 20 locomotives, so 4000 to the 4019, which is why you see the compressor intercoolers mounted on the pilot deck here versus behind the shield as it was on the later locomotives and the retrofits from the original locomotives. While we're up here, we can take a look at the whistle. Very beautifully modeled here. I think that's really cool that everything's animated. Whistle steam is much more prominent when the locomotive is in a cold environment setting. If we're loading this up in the summer, you're not really going to see that whistle steam like that. You got your front end throttle here. And last but not least, you got your bell. Alright, so I think the only thing that I have left here are the class lights and the smoke wings. So the class lights automatically are set to the white setting, which means the train is an extra. You have the option to turn the class lights off, set them to green, or set them to red. If the class lights are off, the train is running a regular schedule. If the class lights are green, that means the train is running a regular schedule with a following section. And if the class lights are red, that means the locomotive is at the rear of the train. So there's really, I don't really ever see a reason to change those. Let's see. Yep, so leave them on, just leave them on white. The control is U or Shift U for the class lights there. And yeah, so let's go into the cab again. That's this center control for the ash pan here. As I said, toggles on and off the smoke wings. There we go. These were experimentally mounted onto the 4019 for a short period of time before it was determined that they were not necessary to lift the smoke out of the line of sight of the engineer and the fireman. I think they look kind of, I don't know, they look kind of odd on the 4000s. I think they fit the Challenger a little bit better. They're also mounted on a portion of the running boards that are tapered in for clearance purposes. So when they're actually activated, they do sort of obstruct the forward vision of the engineer just slightly. Let's see if we can demonstrate that here. Yeah, okay. Yep, so you can see that. Cool. Alright, so I don't think there's anything else here that's of major importance. Get your Stoker reverse control here, just in case there's a Stoker blockage. But other than that, that's pretty much what I wanted to look at on the locomotive itself. You got a few things on the tender. You got your dynamic coal load, and your backup light that's above the rear tender light here. That's controlled by that switch in the cab. And then you got your water hatches, which you can actually open these water hatches if you're stopping at a water plug. Shift W. Yep, there you go. The locomotive will take on water with the hatches closed. This is really more of a cosmetic feature for realism. Yeah, so there you have it. That is the exterior model for the locomotive and the cab controls. The next two videos will be focused on operating the locomotive from the engineer's seat and firing the locomotive from the fireman's seat with the automatic fireman shut off. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.